Sorry for the technical problems at the start, it's my fault. Yeah, I work in the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. I couldn't think of a good picture to put up, so I thought I'd put it where I work. Today I'm going to talk a bit about citizen science, something we call citizen science, and how I think we're in a kind of a golden age of that, and I think that we, certainly for what we do, which is crowdsourced science and engage people in research, our job is a changing one, and I just want to kind of take you through that story. I couldn't have imagined a better introduction to what I'm going to talk about than that we just had from Mia, so I thank you for that. I think crowdsourcing is a term that gets used a lot these days, and I think certainly in some audiences, or in the way that it's written about and people understand it, it's mixed up with these other two terms here, and I think for me we consider our project citizen science, and I think crowdsourcing, volunteer computing and citizen science are for many people all kind of the same thing, except I think they're probably not. Probably the original crowdsourcing project, the OED, which I think just a nod to where a lot of our group are, this was a project where they collected words and asked people to submit words that became the Oxford English Dictionary. There's probably no earlier example than that. Great Garden Birdwatch is similar in that people are crowdsourcing here observations, so observations of birds in people's gardens, and so basically building up a species map. Again, this is a similar project in the US. This is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Again, crowdsourcing, but again, crowdsourcing the data collection side of things. Just briefly, the volunteer computing side is not something I'm going to spend too much time on today, but I think, again, it's this idea where people are giving up their time or giving up resources that they have towards a larger effort. This is the SETI at Home project, looking for signals of extraterrestrials in radio data, and of course the kind of platform that's come from that, which is the BOINC software. Moving towards the kind of citizen science crowdsourcing side of things, this is a project called Fold It, where members of the public are invited to try and fold proteins. This is a protein, this is a large complex molecule. This is actually an incredibly well thought through game now, I would say. This is where people are folding, and there's a model running in your computer. This is a Java applet that runs on your machine. And as you fold the protein, it works out a rough calculation of the energy of the molecule, and the game is to maximize your score, to minimize the energy of the molecule. This game has recently produced a result where they've shown how to fold a analog virus for the AIDS virus, for the HIV virus, I should say. It took them 10 days, the community, to fold it. This is a project that's taken the academic community well over a decade. So the people who are doing this are outperforming even the best automated methods that are available to researchers today. And then there's something like Galaxy Zoo. This is not a good shot to choose. Galaxies are always very hard to project. Or if we go back to the earliest version, this is the original project that we launched back in 2007. Galaxy Zoo was launched for a very specific reason. We had a problem. We had a lot of galaxies, and we needed to classify them. And it's worth just spending a couple of minutes. Sorry for the astrophysics lesson here. It's worth just spending a couple of minutes explaining why this was good things for people to do. So, if you get a picture of a galaxy as an astronomer, you want to do, the first thing you probably want to do with it is say what type of galaxy it is. And so this is the Hubble tuning fork, which is a diagram that astronomers use to classify galaxies by their shape. And on one side we've got elliptical galaxies, which are these kind of fuzzy spherical objects, and on the right hand side here we've got spiral galaxies like our own Milky Way. Now this was used to be thought that this was actually an evolution sequence. Things went from the left to the right here, but this is actually not true. It's almost certainly the other way. But this is a classification scheme that astronomers are always trying to use when they get a picture of a galaxy. So here's two pictures of galaxies. So one's a spiral on the left there, one's an elliptical on the right. Now the problem with galaxy classification is that automated methods are far outperformed by humans. So the premier method for classifying a galaxy is still by human eye. And so when we are faced with a collection of images, as astronomers, we classify them by their shape, and we do them usually by eye. And this would be fine except for this telescope. This is a bit of a physics joke, but this is what happens when you let physicists build a telescope. They make it robotic, and they scan the whole sky. This is the Sloan Digital Sky Survey telescope. This is probably the most significant scientific instrument in astronomy after Galileo's original instrument. This telescope is systematically, and still going, it's been going for about 10 years now, is systematically every night recording images and spectra of objects in the heavens. And just to give you an idea of the scale of the data rates, if we go back probably about 50 years, when you'd be taking images of galaxies using photographic plates, so putting in a large film slide in the back of the telescope, imaging, and then developing the film. You take it to your boss. Perhaps for your whole PhD, you might image 100 galaxies if you were lucky. Take them to your boss, they classify them, and you'd go and write your thesis. Moving forward to 2007, this is the sort of volume of classifications that were produced by a team of professional astronomers. There's 10,000 galaxies classified by their shape, again, by human eye. And we had a PhD student in Oxford called Kevin Shavinsky, who, in a rather heroic effort, managed to classify 50,000 galaxies in a month, which is, Kevin's not a normal guy, as I'm sure you are now realizing. And this is the scale of the Sloan Data Release 5. So this is back in 2006, this data release came out. There were 1 million galaxy images. And so we had a problem. We had a couple of core research cases that required basically the full Sloan data set to be classified by human eye. And Kevin was actually not willing to do the rest. So anyway, so we launched a project, Galaxy Zoo, and this is what happened. We were completely taken by surprise. This is time after launch, classifications per hour, and you can see here there's a little blip there, which is when the site launched. Then the server melted and was down for 6 hours. And then we got new server hardware and off we went. But just putting some units on here, here's that survey paper from 2007, 10,000 classifications. This is a Kevin month. So we were doing a Kevin month an hour, which is pretty good rate. So Galaxy Zoo was successful in attracting about 170,000 community classifiers. Between them, of those million galaxies, they produced about 50 million classifications, so about 50 repeat classifications of each object. And I guess this is crowdsourced science, right? This is small amounts of work, the work unit being a classification of a galaxy by its shape, and lots of people doing it. I think it's worth just briefly talking about how we would analyze those results and how we went on to produce science from those results. And our primary method of analysis is comparison with professional. So if this is our crowd of community classifiers, and here's our person in green, this is our professional astronomer, we asked the team that were behind the project to classify a small number of the objects within the full data set. So something like 1,000 galaxies were classified by the team. What we can then do is we can say, well, who in this community, and people in blue here, have classified the same objects as the professional? And then we can look at how they classified that object and see where there's agreement. And so if you've got your professional astronomer on the left there, you've got your community classifier who has seen the same object, which is this spiral galaxy here. And if they agree, then you can say, well, actually, this person is ranked highly. But of course, you don't want to have your astronomers classify the full data set, so you can then do a second generation and a third and a fourth if you need to compare the people who haven't seen the same objects as the professional with the people who have. So you can do like a second generation comparison. And you can build basically a confidence measure for your whole community this way. Some of the confidence measures, some of the correlations are much tighter than others, but you basically build up a score for all your individuals. Sounds complex, but the take-home message is it works. And in fact, the data set that we collect is better than a professional classification, and I will explain what I mean by that. And again, not good lighting for this. By having repeat classifications, it allows you to do something quite unexpected. You begin to build a measure of the confidence of the classification of each object. So if we just ask Kevin to say whether an object was a spiral galaxy or not, we're subject to perhaps Kevin's biases about color correlating with shape, or perhaps he was tired and he just misclassified it. But when you have repeat classifications, and in this case, these are all mergers, so there was an option to pick merger in Galaxy Zoo. So these are all objects that the community said were merging galaxies, where two are colliding. And on the left here, clean, on the right, super clean. The cuts here are something like 80% on the left said that it was a merging pair, and on the right, it's something like 90%. So not only do you begin to correct for the person who got it wrong, or maybe the malicious classifier, not that we see much evidence of that, but you also begin to build a confidence measure of your classification. So this is why this data set proves to be richer than an individual classifier. You begin to build a measure of how spiral a galaxy is, and that's kind of a weird concept to have, but it's useful when you're trying to select galaxies for follow-up or trying to be very certain about a type of object. So anyway, Galaxy Zoo produces science. We're academics at heart. We consider the sort of unit of scientific results still the academic paper, and so far Galaxy Zoo has produced something around 25 peer-reviewed publications. This is another crowdsourcing project. Again, this is a project that we have been embarked upon with our scientific collaborators, this time at the Met Office, and this is a project called Old Weather. This is where people are, again, doing something that machines are bad at. And I think that pretty much all the projects we take on are impossible with machines, and impossible in the sense that you couldn't use the data that you would collect by machines to do the same science. So that when I say that, I mean character transcription. So this is a record of a ship's day. So this is top to bottom is 24 hours. This is HMS Caledonian, I think. The date is 27th of September 1916. We're in dock somewhere. But you can see here at 4, 8, so hours are the columns in the far left column there. At 4, 8, and 12, and then there's 1600 hours and 2000 hours as we go down the page. You can see here that they collect wind information, the direction, the speed. They collect the temperature of the water, so the sea around them, the air temperature, and they also measure the pressure of the air pressure. They also make some notes about the general activities on the ship. But the point here is that this information in these weather columns is crucial for extending the timeline of accurate weather observations for climate research that's going on today. So in these logs, we have this rich source of climate data. The problem with these records is that if you use OCR to transcribe them or to extract the data from them, the OCR routines are so poor that almost all of the records have to be checked by human eye anyway. So you're in this interesting position. They do this a lot in NCDC in the US, where they have teams of people they've got two approaches. One is to what they call keying, so single keying or double keying of these records, where people just sit down and look at a log, type in what they see. And they also have been trying in parallel with that automated methods combined with the human individual, basically error correcting. And it turns out that the quality of the OCR is basically insufficient, and you need to have human classifiers or human transcribers. So this is what we do in Old Weather. We actually have a interface to this which asks members of our community to do it. So this is a bespoke interface for transcription, exactly this format of logs. But the point here is that we ask people to join a voyage. So you have a ship and its logs. We have them in chronological order. And you go through day by day, just transcribing the weather records that are in those logs. And just to point out kind of what data we're trying to collect, this is a Google Earth representation of all the weather observations that were made on October the 16th, 1987. Now, if you were in the south of England that day, you'll remember that was the day that there was a hurricane in the south of England. And you can see here the blue spots there. These are all air pressure observations, but all the points on this globe are all the weather observations that were made that day, and we can see that there's a rich collection of data there. What climate scientists do is they try and reconstruct the weather on that day globally. So now we're putting on the ice bars you can see here, are actually from a reconstruction of the climate. If we go to the southern hemisphere on the same time and date, this is again that same model of the Earth, what was happening in the atmosphere that day. But you can begin to see these, this sort of what they call the fog of uncertainty, this light, cloudy stuff. This is where there's uncertainty in the model, where they're acutely aware of the fact that you can see that we're lacking weather observations in the southern hemisphere. You see New Zealand and Australia there. You can see some of the Antarctic weather observation points, but in the southern oceans there's a lack of high quality data, or a lack of data at all. If we go back 100 years to the time era of old weather, which is kind of over the First World War, again we can see where there were weather observations made that day, but now you can see that this fog of uncertainty is extended right up into the northern hemisphere, and it's in the mid-Atlantic and across huge swathes of Africa there. If we go to the southern hemisphere on that same day, so this is again now in 1918, we have no idea what was happening in the southern hemisphere 100 years ago. We just cannot reconstruct the climate. And why does this matter? Well, this matters because if we're trying to understand the frequency of extreme weather events, or in fact general trends in climate, then understanding what the weather was doing 100 years ago is actually really, really important. And so old weather aims to address this by collecting data points for this time period. And here's some of the data. So this is just a Google Fusion Tables view. These are weather observations made or collected by the old weather community. And you can see this is the First World War. These are Royal Naval ships logs. You can see that there's a lot of data in the kind of North Sea. But you can also see that there's ships going down to the Falklands there, presumably for the Battle of the Falklands. And you can see the trade routes through to East India. But you can also see that where there was that gap in the climate models before, we've actually got ships going through there. We've got mobile weather stations. You can also see that there's the odd error where you'll see a transcription somewhere in the Amazon jungle that's probably not real. But anyway, the data are not perfect. But with these data, you can start to do fun things. So I was saying that in that right-hand column, we have the kind of general data about what was happening that day. These records are actually the legal document of the ship. This is the if somebody dies on board, or people would get into battle and you're capturing enemy sailors or rescuing enemy sailors, then this is the document that would be used to review what went on that day. So this is HMS Inflexible, 8th of December 1914. If you know your First World War history, this was around the time of the Battle of the Falklands. You can see HMS Flexible here, and if this is called Old Weather Voyages, we can see here the colour of the line is the temperature that the ship was measuring, so we can see it warms up as it goes through the tropics. But we can see here in the left actually what was happening at this time. And so we've got basically, you can see that they're engaging the enemy there in the battle. And this is some of the stuff that we've been trying to do to basically explore the historical records within as well. This is HMS Africa, data from it. This is the number of people on the sick list. This is also data that's in the logs. And you can see here, the giant spike here is actually the Spanish flu around 1918. This is old weather, so we can dig through the data that we're collecting. What was happening? It was wartime, or was it happy or a sad time? Well, it turns out that just searching for these words, it's generally a sad time, which I guess would be expected during war. But what sports were popular during the war? Well, it turns out that dancing was more popular than boxing. Not something I would have expected of the Royal Navy, but there you go. Dancing was good. And what was the weather like? It's probably worth noting. It was generally bad. So I thought you'd all want to know that. That's, yes. More importantly, especially for this audience, the interface that we developed here is something that we generalized out and is actually available open source with an Apache 2 license. You can go and do whatever you like with it. We called it Scribe. It's a very simple JavaScript-based plugin that allows you to draw mark shapes on an image and collect transcriptions. So if you're interested in trying something similar, I'd encourage you to go and check it out. So far, I haven't talked about why our community get involved with our projects, and I think this is worth spending some time on. Between Galaxy Zoo, the original, and Galaxy Zoo 2, we invited about 20,000 of our community to take a survey. And so this is, I have to put my research hat on and say this is a biased sample These are people who were interested in coming back to a second version of the site. That said, I think it's an interesting sample of the community to question, because they're the most motivated people in our community. So there are about 20,000 responses to this survey. This is a distribution of answers, and the question that was presented was, what is your primary motivation for contributing to Galaxy Zoo? And so there were lots of answers. There's across the bottom on the right there's I like science, I like astronomy, I like the project, I'm interested in the scale of the universe, I'm an artist, my teacher sent me, which is very low. My friend sent me, even lower. I think we're older than Facebook probably at this point, so we can excuse ourselves there. But the giant spike here is, this is called research. The answer that people checked to give this response was, I see value in contributing to the research behind the project. So the motivation of the core committed individuals in our community was one of actually contributing to the research goals of Galaxy Zoo, which was an amazing result for us. If you look back at the press release that we put out when we launched Galaxy Zoo, we said something like, come and see pictures of galaxies that nobody's ever seen before, no humans have ever seen before. We thought that would be a motivator, seeing something new. Come and wonder at the scale of the universe. It seems incredibly dumb now to present it like that. Actually, come and help scientists do research and actually do stuff that we can't do with machines. Come and do something that you uniquely as humans can do that we couldn't otherwise do. It completely changed our perspectives on what we were doing. So much so that we actually launched what we call the Zooniverse. And Old Weather and Galaxy Zoo are just two of the 10 projects that we have today, all taking on tasks where the data rate is too large for our academic teams, our collaborators, or just the automated methods just don't exist to do the research that we'd like to. One of our most recent projects that I wanted to tell you about is one called Ancient Lives, which takes ancient Greek papyri from the lost city of Oxyrhynchus. And here, this is somewhat different to Old Weather. It's still transcription, but in this case, it's actually Greek. And here, people are doing character-by-character transcription of these old documents. And here we have the earliest versions of the Gospel of Thomas and lost works of playwrights and philosophers that are only known by name. The actual earliest records of some of their works are in there. We're also hunting for exoplanets using Kepler data from the NASA Kepler mission. I don't know if anybody saw the news story a couple of weeks ago about Tatooine-like Kepler 16b, I think, which is a planet with two suns. We actually found it as well in Planet Hunters. The signature of the exoplanet is in the little yellow box there. You can see it's a pretty narrow dip, and the larger dips are actually due to the stars going around each other and eclipsing each other. Significantly for us, and this is something I wanted again to highlight to this community, is that this discovery was not made using the interface. It was used in the discussion tool around the project. So we have an open source tool called Talk, which is what we call object-oriented discussion. So where the focus of an individual discussion and spin-off discussions is around a single object or collection of objects. And this is a tool that we built because forums didn't really work for us. We have the patterns that produce science are those of collecting similar objects and discussing the characteristics of those. So this is a tool that's kind of bespoke for our needs, but is proving to provide huge research value, certainly in planet hunting. So that planet was also discovered in our community. Today we have about 475,000 volunteers in the Zooniverse, and between them, it's a really difficult number to calculate, but between them they've contributed something like 300 million classifications. That could be a transcription of a weather record or a galaxy classification, and all because of this core motivation that is this contribution to research. I think for us this introduces this idea of the ethics of crowdsourcing. Why, if you're going to take on a project, then maybe you should give yourself some rules for what you should be asking people to do. Are there rules? Is there a social contract? I think for us there is, with this idea of if we have a community who's motivated by research goals, then we should make sure that we're always doing research. So For us internally, we have 3 rules that we apply to projects, and I thought I'd share them because I think they provide value to people who are taking on new projects. Our 3 rules are very simple. We have the first one, which is our community is one of collaborators and not users. That means that when people discover things, when people produce data that we use to produce science, they get credited for that. Where possible, people are authors on papers, but always, if they want to be, they're credited in the acknowledgements. We did try and submit a paper with 170,000 authors on it. It was rejected. Number 2, people should contribute to real research. That means that this is, and I should stress that these are Zooniverse rules, we don't take on projects because they're good outreach endeavours. They happen to teach people about galaxy morphology, but we didn't start Galaxy Zoo because of that. We started it because we needed to achieve some research goals. So this is, again, this is opinionated, but I think useful. Hopefully. And number 3, don't waste people's time. And what I mean by that is you shouldn't be asking people to do things that machines can do. If your automated methods are equally good as human methods, then you shouldn't be getting people to do it. It's not a valid use of their people's time. That's a random slide that's in there. You can also download the data from Galaxy Zoo. This idea of people contributing their time means that the data that they produce should be open as well. So if you go to data.galaxyzoo, you can just go and download all the classifications that people produced.
Arfon, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, cool. I just wanted briefly to say why you should consider crowdsourcing science. I see 4 key benefits. One is scale. You can go through a lot of data. Number 2 is this idea of measurable accuracy, the certainty or uncertainty in your classification. Number 3 is serendipity, and number 4 is education. Now, serendipity comes from the fact that you have people looking at your data instead of machines. This is an object called Hanny's Vorwerp, which I won't have too much time to spend on. But the point here is that this object was in Galaxy Zoo. It was actually the galaxy at the top that was in there. And it was classified by a human called Hanny van Arkel, and she's a Dutch school teacher, and it's called Hanny's Vorwerp. It's astrophysically one of the most exciting objects in the universe. It's a quasar light echo, so there was a quasar in there, it died, produced that crazy green thing. And this is serendipity. This is what you get when people look at your data. I've only got 2 minutes, so I want to very briefly touch on what I think is the future and why I think citizen science for us has to change. This is the next version of the Galaxy Zoo Sloan telescope. This is, you can see people there, or admittedly rendered versions of people, but this is the this is the Large Synoptic Sky Telescope, which is the next survey telescope that's going to be basically measuring, imaging the whole sky every 3 nights. So just as Sloan did about a quarter of the Northern Hemisphere, this thing will do the whole of the Northern Hemisphere every 3 nights. It's going to produce video astronomy. Terrifying. The next radio telescopes, this is the Square Kilometre Array. It's either going to be in South Africa or Australia. The take-home message here is going to be the size of a continent, which is rather terrifying. So when you think about LSST, the data rates are phenomenal. We don't know how we're going to deal with the next data rates, but what we know is that we either need to get the whole world doing Galaxy Zoo, which is ambitious, or we need to revert to some automated methods. So we need to think about how we're going to combine people with machine classifiers. So you've got noisy, lots of data, follow-up is expensive. So what you do, what objects you pick from the noisy quantities of large images is going to become extremely important. So you have to think about what people are good at instead of machines. And number 1 is training. People do things that machines can't, or we haven't programmed into our algorithms yet. So watching how people classify things, this is eyeball tracking, seeing how people, experienced and inexperienced people, classify galaxies, is something we can learn from. The protein folding, how people fold proteins in these games actually can teach machines to do more sophisticated analyses. Preference learning. So when there's something you can actually quantify about a galaxy, like the bar strength, instead of asking people to say something absolute, ask them to say something relative. Ask them to put something on a scale. Ask them to compare 2 objects and give you a preference. So which has the stronger bar? This is something often algorithms need. They just need a small amount of help to find out which is more like this one. And that's all the algorithm needs to continue on with its automated methods. But again, this is something humans are very good at. And finally, working out how to combine machines and algorithms. Which person should classify this galaxy? Which algorithm should classify this galaxy? Modelling the performance of the individual is something that we're that we're really interested in. This is getting a bit boring for this conference now. This is Google Boxes, and I know I thought I might be the first to show this, but I'm not. We're interested in tapping a bit more of this cognitive surplus. People are very, very special and can do things that machines can't, and I think Zooniverse is interested in working out how to maximize people's efforts. Thanks.